There is no such thing as a spotless hero, especially in times of war for a nation just being born. This could not be more true of the father of America's Navy, John Paul Jones.
You're listening to History Unscripted with Gabriel and Carl.
Welcome back, everybody. History Unscripted with Gabriel and Carl. It's been a while. It's been a few weeks, I'd say, maybe close to a month since our last posting. So for our loyal followers, we apologize. I needed to get a new mic. I was not happy with my cheap Amazon mic, so I did a ton of research for the last couple of weeks, and I just ended up getting another cheap Amazon mic. So I do hope this one is a little bit better, though, for the sound quality. But without further ado, we are still in our Unsung Heroes of History, which has turned into be just a blast to research. This has been a hoot to dive into, learning about these figures of history that just don't get enough recognition. And John Paul Jones, hell of a musician. No, I'm just kidding. It's not that John Paul Jones. There is a John Paul Jones for my music fans out there. He was the bassist and keyboardist for the English rock band Led Zeppelin. And that dude kept popping up when we do our research. But that just proves that the John Paul Jones that we're actually going to be talking about is an unsung hero, right? Because he doesn't get the first Google click. The musician does. So John Paul Jones, he is... All right, so let's just jump in kind of to some controversy with this guy. All right, let's just dive right on in. So you might have heard, maybe perchance, or you might hear in the future that John Paul Jones is the quote-unquote father of the Navy. Now, that does not mean he was the organizer of the United States Navy. He was not the logistician. He was not the quartermaster of the United States Navy that assembled all the ships together, like you would in your battleship game and placed them around the world. No. What John Paul Jones represents, if you consider him the father of the U.S. Navy, is the spirit of the United States Navy. When you consider the United States Navy as the strongest Navy ever to sail the seas, they kick ass, they take names. That was John Paul Jones. So he is the father of the Navy in the sense that his spirit, his fighting spirit, his willingness to die for his country, right, that we expect in our Navy today as Americans, that standard that he set is still around today. And that is what makes him kind of the father of the Navy. Okay? To be honest with you guys, to be truthful, John Adams, and he actually gets more credit with the organization of the Navy back in the American Revolutionary War. But when you think of that spirit of the fighting Navy, the powerful United States Navy, you got to look to John Paul Jones as the standard bearer. Carl, would you agree?
I would absolutely agree on every point.
Nail it. So, who was this John Paul Jones? Now, I'm going to set up a little context, and then we'll let Carl talk a little bit more about the man himself. The United States is fighting Great Britain, right? We've signed our Declaration of Independence, 1776. That doesn't work. Britain does not just allow us to be independent. So most people think of the Revolutionary War. Yeah, I know. If only it was that easy. If only that piece of paper would have done it. Most people think of the Revolutionary War as primarily fought on land, which is probably true. I mean, George Washington, the Continental Army, those guys get, majority of the credit for the victory against the Navy or against the British. And I don't think that's wrong necessarily. But there's a whole nother component to warfare in the 1700s, and that is the Navy. Okay? And the United States needed to build a Navy, just as they needed to build an army and find a commander, who they found in George Washington. They needed to build a Navy and find a commander, a leader for that Navy. And John Paul Jones, he steps up and becomes one of those great leaders, one of those first great leaders of the United States Navy. A lot of people that fought against the British, a lot of Americans that fought against the British in the Revolutionary War on the seas were privateers. And those guys were not necessarily mercenaries. Carl, would you say mercenaries? I wouldn't necessarily call them mercenaries, or would you use that term for like a privateer?
I think that's the best layman's term that we can use.
Okay.
It seems like most privateers during that time that fought for the United States, they basically fought for us as an excuse to fight the enemy,
Right.
as an excuse to fight the British. Like, hey,
Right.
I'll join up with you if I can shoot
Yeah.
down some British ships.
Yes. Yes. They were Americans. They weren't necessarily coming from other countries, but they're using their own private vessels. They have their own private reasons. In fact, privateers were so common back then that we think of pirates, right? Sailing the seas, adventure, right? There weren't a lot of true pirates that we would. It was actually privateers. That was these kind of dudes going up. They equipped their ships, they got their crew, and they would fight on behalf of a country. But then they would take a lot of the spoils. They would take a lot of that glory. Again, they were doing it for selfish reasons. What makes John Paul Jones so freaking awesome, in my opinion, is that he has the ability, he has the skill to be a privateer and a damn good one, but he decides, you know what? I'm going to join this brand new Navy. So he takes that leap of faith, right? He takes that jump. He's probably not going to get paid. There's no real organization yet. It's a brand new Navy, and he says, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to be a privateer, even though he could have been. He actually joins the Navy, and he fights as a Navy man against the British. And he takes the fight to the British. And does he have any crazy strategic victories? Not necessarily. But what he represents is a lasting legacy for the United States Navy. And so I think that's a great intro to who this man is. Carl, what you got, man? John Paul Jones. Let's dive into some of these finer points that we can talk about here.
All right. So John was born John Paul, added the Jones later. But John was born in Kirkby, Scotland. And I found it interesting. His father was actually a gardener.
Like that was his job, was a gardener?
That was he was the head gardener of some lavish estate.
Okay, that makes sense. That could be like a... You know, it's crazy to think back then they could afford like a house, like they could afford to support their family. I'm a gardener.
Yeah. I watch trees grow.
Yeah, it's like those house hunting shows where it's like wife works at home, man gardener, budget $750,000.
Seriously.
So
Those
okay.
shows, my wife used to watch those shows and they just enraged me.
Yeah.
Like there's no possible way.
Right.
But getting back to John, he, from what I read, he just always was drawn to the sea. So he actually became an apprentice on a ship at 12 years old.
Wow.
A merchant ship. But still, you think of just getting your foot in the door, talking with the captain, seeing how a ship is supposed to be run and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it had to be invaluable experience. Mm-hmm. And so, a while later, at the age of 19, Jones made third mate on a ship that was involved in the slave trade. So a little bit more risk, a little bit more danger. Mm-hmm. 2 years later, he quit that. And then on the voyage home, the captain and first mate both died of sickness. And so he took charge and guided that ship home. And the country of Scotland appointed him the title of master. And so, excuse me, now he's getting into be more into like the leadership roles. Okay. But he is already starting to get kind of the reputation of being a loose cannon, kind of a maniac. And so it's, I found that in 1773, he actually killed the leader of a mutiny by just running him through with a sword.
Oh, wow.
Just on the ship. And a year or two prior to this, he was accused of flogging a man to death, but in trial, They later proved that that crewmate actually died of fever, is what they chalked it up to,
Mm-hmm.
not his um, injuries from being flogged. But still, you have the reputation with you. And so to escape trial again, he actually fled to the Americas. And so, like I said, that was 1773. 2 years later, Declaration of Independence, we need a navy. He says, hey, I've got experience. I'll help you guys out. This is a good opportunity.
Right.
And that's when he adds Jones onto his last name, which, gotta say, 10 out of 10 disguise. No one will ever notice.
Yeah.
No one will ever figure that out.
Yeah. We're looking for a John Paul. Well, we got a John Paul Jones.
You got John Paul Jones.
No,
Matches all the physical descriptions
yeah.
but can't possibly be the same guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so I'll pause you there.
yeah.
So one thing I do want to bring up is this: one of the reasons why he quit the slavers, because he actually detested, maybe not detested, but he was not a fan of slavery. He was not a fan of that working on a slaver ship. So it's kind of interesting, though. Like on one hand, he's like going, I don't like slavery. I'm going to quit this. But on the other hand, he is willing to kill. So I don't know. That's just kind of an interesting dichotomy, I guess, for lack of a better term for me.
Yeah, I actually didn't find that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that I did find that in my research. But that's crazy. At 12 years old, kids these days at 12 can barely hold a pencil, can barely sit through a class, can't write a paper. But this kid at 12, he's like an apprentice on a ship. And guys, sailing is always complicated. Sailing in 1700s is crazy complicated. It takes such a high level of intelligence to sail the seas. Again, arg, matey, pirates just care about the ye gold and my parrot, and I'm just a meathead. No, the dudes that were sailing around the world at 1700 had very high IQs. They had to know so much. There's so much I couldn't even really, it could be a whole nother podcast. You had to navigate without GPS. You had to make sure your sails, and you got to master your crew, and you got to be a good leader. You got to be a problem solver. You just couldn't pull someone off the street. You did have to have a level of IQ to do that job. And so you said at 19, that's when he takes over his own, becomes the captain of a ship.
Yeah, he gets his own ship.
Wow.
Buys his own ship.
Yeah. Jeez. Let's see if I have anything about some of his earlier life that I could add. I'll maybe just do a quick search through my notes and just see. No, I think you covered it really well. Just that he one thing I did say is why his early life matters is that when you think he had a very aggressive leadership style. So and he needs to have when we get to the Revolutionary War. So let's jump into what again, if he's known for any, what is he most known for? It is his actions in the Revolutionary War. So I will talk a little bit about, and we did talk about this before the podcast. One of his first ships he commands is called the Providence. Was it his first one, Carl, or?
Yep,
Okay,
that was his first.
It was his first
ship.
one. And it's a 12-gun sloop, which is tiny compared to a lot of other ships. The USS Providence, 12 guns. Facing off against the British Royal Navy has 24, 48-gun ships, much, much bigger. So to me, that just kind of shows the Navy, the United States Navy is all right, dude, here you go. Here's your rowboat. Go out and fight. Here's your cardboard box, man. We hope you win.
I hope you don't sink.
Yes, exactly. Because the Navy, when the when the Continental Congress, when they make the Navy or they form the Navy, it was primarily, if I understood it correctly, it was, escort services, protect the docks, protect the ports. There was not a huge intention early on, like we're going to go take the fight to the British, right? We're going to go over, we're going to face them head on, and we're going to win. I mean, and you actually see that with George Washington too in the Continental Army, right? George Washington does not fight a super offensive war in the War for Independence. He is very much survive to live another day. But John Paul Jones does not like that. And this is what, again, that fighting spirit of the Navy, this is where this comes into play. So, Carl, again, I'll let you kind of caveat off that. Maybe talk a little bit about what some of his successes commanding the Providence. I mean, which is very impressive for, again, having a little 12-gun sloop sailing around out there. So, go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So, what I found, this is the part of John Paul Jones's life that even as a history guy, like I knew who he was. I knew the Battle of Flamborough Head. I knew his famous quote, which we'll discuss later. Like I knew that stuff, the father of America's Navy. I didn't know his success pedigree,
right,
leading up to that. And so when he was put as the captain of the Providence, over the next month and a half, he either sank or captured 16 British ships, including 2 frigates that were between 28 and 44 guns each. Like 3 times the size, or at least the firepower of the Providence, and he was still taking them down and going head on at them. He had a quote later on where he said, "Give me a ship that has speed, for I fully intend to charge head on into danger."
Wow.
That's just his attitude, the kind of guy that he was.
Yeah.
And so because of his success, as you can imagine, especially for a fledgling nation in Congress, they liked him. Mm-hmm. And they favored him pretty big time. And so they actually gave him a bigger ship called the Ranger.
Yep.
And then Jones was then tasked with taking the Ranger over to France and for like the discussing of the treaty.
Okay.
Of the alliance between France and America.
Right.
And while he was over there, he, as you can guess, he wasn't really much to just sit on his hands. So he decided to actually go into the English Sea and take the fight to the British Navy on their own soil.
Wow.
And he did more than that. I found that along the coast of England, Scotland, actually Kirkbean he went to and looted. Became like an actual pirate. So much so that he was starting to be talked in the same breath as like Blackbeard.
Really? I didn't find that's really cool.
They had like he had the same aura about him as the pirate legends of old.
Right.
And so he like you had said earlier, he didn't accomplish anything highly strategic with that.
Right.
Necessarily. But it was more of a nuisance. But hey, that's plenty enough when you're just kind of grasping for anything, when nobody else is doing anything worth note.
Right.
And so he captures a bunch more ships, takes them back, and then he gets gifted another ship from France, which he renames to the Bonamy Richard.
That's it, yeah. And this is kind of his like, I mean, this is his ship. Like that was kind of, because that's like it was like a 40-gun frigate.
Repurposed merchant ship, but yeah, it was the size of a frigate.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I mean, the creme de la creme for him. You know, I mean, he's gone from, because even the Ranger, that was like an 18-gun sloop, I think, sloop of war. I have it in my notes. So that's not much bigger than the Providence. You know, so when he's doubling the amount of guns, and that matters, right? Like the guns on the ship kind of make the ship, right? Mm-hmm. You just want as much firepower as you can, and now he has it with Richard.
Yeah. And so he was like, hey, you know what? That was pretty successful the first time. I'm going to go do it again.
Hmm.
And so it goes back up to the English Channel. And this is where, on this voyage, he runs into a merchant fleet of 40 ships. And escorting them is the Countess of Scarborough and the HMS Serapis. And
Okay.
this is where the Battle of Flamborough Head uh, happens.
And this is his most famous battle. Like definitely the largest one he ever partaken.
By far.
Yeah, by far. So, all right, brother. Well, keep going, man. You're on a roll. I love it.
So when Jones catches up with this fleet, um, though most of the other ships are merchant ships, they still have guns on them. They still have. You have to consider it. So he
Right.
actually catches up to them in the evening time. It's a little bit harder to glass them out,
Okay.
and he orders his two other escort ships to sail directly behind him so that it hides his numbers.
Okay. I dig that.
And then he gets right up on them, and the captain of the Serapis, I have his name here somewhere, um, Richard Pearson, which very modern name. Um, he hails the Bonamy Richard, and Jones doesn't answer, and then he hails him again, still no answer, and at the second no answer, both ships full broadside each other.
That's so cool.
But since the Richard was kind of a hodgepodge ship, a lot of the guns actually exploded in the hull, and so didn't fire. And now he's out a bunch of cannons.
Oh man. So he's handicapped like after the first round, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And this was when uh, Pearson, seeing that a bunch of Jones's cannon is now out of commission, and he was already undergunned to begin with.
Right. Right.
This is when Pearson yells out, "Are you sure you don't want to surrender?" And Jones's immediate response was, "I have not yet begun to fight."
That's so cool. I love that. I love that quote. I mean, certain death, like if your ship goes down, I mean, the captain always goes with the ship, right? That's kind of the cliche, but like you're toast, man. Because the British, when they capture you, I think we kind of have this picture, maybe the American Revolutionary War, where like it was a very gentleman war. It's the British. They're nice. They have such respect culture. Like no, like it was
It's
certain death.
war.
I mean, it was still a war. And if he would have been captured, he would have probably been tortured. He'd been thrown in prison at the very best, killed at the worst, or he drowns to death. I mean, in the fact that that's his quote is, I've yet to begun to fight. Uh, so, again, I love that. I love that. So, all right. So, continue.
Um, oh, and I should throw this in here too. I don't know why this just makes it so much cooler, but apparently John Paul Jones was not a very big guy.
Yeah, he's like 5'5".
Like 5'5" with a
Yeah.
slender build. So
Yep.
he's
I
just
found that
not a
too.
big dude at all.
Right.
It's just real chihuahua-like.
Yeah. Nipping at your heels, but it
Yeah.
worked.
And so Jones, knowing that he is now severely undergunned, and he's in a repurposed merchant ship that was older than the Serapis, he can't
Right.
outmaneuver them either. So he knows his only way of victory is to grapple and fight hand-to-hand combat and board the Serapis.
Oh,
And
man.
so,
That guy's just
but
another
here's
level.
just a whole nother level. But Pearson knows this too. And so he is trying his best to outmaneuver the Bonamy Richard. And so, from what they described, is the Richard was just kind of like turning as much as it could, and the Serapis was trying to maneuver around it
Okay.
and kept trying to encircle it while the crew members of the Richard, I think they said they failed 9 to 10 times to grapple the Serapis.
Oh, wow.
And so, in turning, their bows actually connected and then kind of spun, and Pearson dropped his anchor, hoping that when it hit the floor, it would yank his bow away. But what ended up happening was it actually created a pivot point, and then it swung the Bonamy Richard into itself.
Okay.
And so they were facing opposite ways.
Oh, wow.
And the rigging was tied up together. So now Jones finally had his opportunity. And something that actually really helped him with this ship is that the deck was built considerably higher. And so the Americans were able to use that railing as cover and lean over and shoot down
Onto
the
the
British.
high ground. Anakin.
They had the high ground.
Yeah.
You don't challenge the high ground.
Right.
So the battle lasted nearly 4 hours
Wow.
like this, and kind of I wouldn't say stalemate,
Right.
but over the 4 hours, each side lost. The British lost 117, the Americans lost 170 men, which for a 4-hour battle is not that much.
Right.
And I did not find what happened with the other escort ships that were in the fight. So I don't know if they were just kind of letting the two big dogs duke it out, or what they were doing. But in the fray, another quote by Jones: "The American flag was shot off of the mast, which is normally a signal of surrender."
Right.
And so the British, yeah, exactly. And so the British master at arms saw this, yelled up to Jones, "Are you now surrendering?" Kind of taunting him.
Uh-huh.
And Jones replied with, "I may sink, but I'll be damned if I ever surrender."
Oh, wow. So yeah, dude, that's what we expect from our Navy. As Americans in 2026, that's exactly what we expect from our Navy today. And John Paul Jones set that standard in 1779. So, because that's the year the battle took place.
Yeah. So after this, I don't know why they didn't do this earlier. This kind of seems like a no-brainer.
Uh-huh.
But the Americans threw grenades to the deck of the Serapis. Like, shouldn't you have started with that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Like that kind of seems like the biggest punch.
Right.
Maybe they didn't want to inflict their damage to their own ship.
That might be collateral damage. Absolutely, close quarters combat like that.
But this sets off a chain reaction of explosion in the powder room of the Serapis, and so now they're out of ammunition.
Wow.
And then now they're completely sitting ducks, basically.
Right, and that's how because he captures the warship. He captures it.
With actually, the Bonamy Richard had a lot more damage than the Serapis did. The day after, the Richard actually ended up sinking, and they sailed back to France in the Serapis.
So he gets. I mean, but that's so cool in a way, dude.
Yeah.
Like he is sailing on this British warship. I mean, because the British Navy is top tier in the world at this point. I mean, it's a really big deal to capture a British warship. And you think that he was already working with, like, he was sent to France for negotiations for that French alliance, which, I mean, when you think why the United States won the Revolutionary War, we got to give credit to France, a lot of credit to France. Because you also got to think Benjamin Franklin was sent to France for to negotiate. This guy, so clearly he is, like Carl mentioned earlier, he is thought of very highly amongst our founding fathers in the Continental Congress. And so, although this battle may not be some giant strategic victory, it doesn't change the course of the war. In fact, the war goes on another 4 years after. But you got to think, or you got to know, like, it definitely helps with, like, it shows France and the whole world that, holy crap, Americans are tough on the seas too. We're not only tough rugged on the land with George Washington and his, you know, makeshift of a continental army, were also the same fighting spirit on the sea. And I did actually find that, I don't know if it was before or after this battle, that John Paul Jones and his ship was like crossing a French ship, and the French gave him like the salute, essentially, like a show of respect. And that just, again, this is like a tiny little navy, and then the French Navy is also top tier in the world, and yet they respect him enough to give him that salute or respect on the sea.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he is so important. Because even after the war, doesn't he go off to Russia in his remains, or like in Europe? I mean, it's not like he becomes some American hero that's paraded around and, you know, works with the Navy and builds up the United States Navy. In some ways, he almost fades off.
Yeah, I actually have that in my notes for after the war. I do this. I found a quote that was from the British captain Richard Pearson when he was surrendering.
Yeah.
And so he's presenting his sword in surrender to Jones, and he said, "It is with the greatest reluctance that I am now obliged to resign this, for it is painful for me, more particularly at this time, when compelled to deliver up my sword to a man who may be said to fight with a halter around his neck."
Dude, that is like that's the 1700s British equivalent of like, okay, I'll do it, but I'm doing this in protest.
Yeah, like, I respect you that you beat me, but you are a madman.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
That I don't want to, but I have to.
Have to, yeah. I'll do it, but I'm pissed.
Yeah, seriously. He was not happy at all. Well, I mean, because you also got to think he was Scottish. You know, John Paul Jones was from Scotland. In their eyes, he's a traitor.
Yeah.
Even more so than the American colonies.
Right.
Because
right.
at least the
From
American
island.
colonies had been separated for 100 years.
Right.
This guy it was within his own lifetime.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. So that adds the insult to the injury.
Yeah, that's the huge insult. Is not only is this guy a lunatic and a pirate and all these different things, he's also a traitor, and I have to surrender to him.
Yeah, exactly. But dude, that is the story. That's what makes the American Revolution, I think, so awesome. I just think that's just part of what makes the American Revolution so awesome, and the birth of our nation just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, we really defied all odds, man.
Yeah, honestly.
I mean, in this battle, like in John Paul Jones's career in the Navy, really encapsulates that, I think, for sure. And I want to read, let's go back in time a little bit. I had a couple little things about, like, so in 1778, when he took the war to the British doorstep, essentially, in Whitehaven, it was like he led a raid on the British port and just wanted to damage ships in the harbor, and he created a lot of panic because an American force had landed on British soil. I mean, because that would be freaky. Because imagine you're a British civilian and you wake up one day and you're part of the world's largest empire, and you see like these American flags, you know, and there is John Paul Jones, the madman, on your doorstep with his ragtag little group, his little ship.
Just causing havoc.
Just causing havoc. I mean, there is psychological aspect to that for sure. Like, oh, wow, we got to deal with this dude. And there was one, St. Mary's Isle. He attempted to kidnap a local nobleman, the Earl of Selkirk, in hopes to exchange him for American prisoners. But Earl wasn't home, so John Paul Jones, being a pirate at heart, or privateer at heart, took some silver instead. And then it says Jones paid for the silver to be returned.
I read that he took his teapot.
He took his teapot.
Allegedly with the warm tea still inside of it.
That's hysterical. You cannot make this up, dude.
I can just imagine him. Where the heck is he? Where
Yeah.
is the lad?
Yeah.
Ah, he's not home. Ah, well, I'll take his teapot.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Man, people used to actually go on real adventures. Nowadays, people are just like, oh, I went to Walmart at 9 o'clock on a Friday. Let's go on an adventure.
That's an
John Paul
adventure.
Jones. Yeah, that is an adventure. Capturing a nobleman, not fighting him, and then potentially taking his teapot instead, which would be a huge insult to British people. Like, tea is a huge reason why the American Revolution even started. So tea's a really big deal. So taking a British person's teapot in the 1700s is like, F you, dude. F you.
I can imagine that guy getting home and being like, oh man, I can't even have a decent
Cup
glass of
of
tea
tea.
around this place.
Oh man. So,
Um,
oh, that's
I
great.
did, although getting back to serious, real quick, I found that so he's leaving the Battle of Flamborough, and
Hmm.
he actually has to go to a Dutch harbor, and he's to repair and everything. And
Okay.
when the Dutch see, because they've heard of his exploits too,
Right.
and when they see that he has two new frigates captured, plus the merchant ships, and he's sailing their ship with a whole bunch of prisoners, the Dutch actually nickname him the Terror of the English.
Oh, that's cool, man. Gosh, I would totally get that tattooed on me if
Then
I was.
when ends up going back to France,
Hmm.
he he gifts the French king the Serapis as a
Oh,
gift.
wow.
And
Okay.
then the French king was so impressed and just basically loved sticking it to the English so much that he gave Jones an elegant gold embroidered sword and gave him back the Serapis as a personal gift
Wow.
and credited him with keeping freedom of the seas.
Wow. That's cool, man.
That's pretty legit.
That is cool. That is just cool.
Um,
Um,
then do you want to talk a little bit about after, like you said, him going to Russia?
well, let me do a quick Google. I just found out, and it surprised me that he just after the war he doesn't stay. Like think of like Marquis Lafayette. He was a French, but he like parades around the United States. I mean, you have Fayetteville's Lafayette County, like obviously named after him in some way, shape, or form. I think, but John Paul Jones, after doing all this, he's not. He doesn't stay. Let me just Google it real fast for our listeners here.
From what I found, it was because the Continental Congress liquidated the Navy. They
That would make
disbanded the
sense.
Navy afterwards because
Yep.
they had no idea what the finances were going to be or how it was going to
Right.
operate and stuff.
Right. Yep.
And
It
so,
was disbanded. The Navy was disbanded, so he's unemployed.
yeah,
So yeah, Catherine the Great was the Russian czar, I guess, and the Russia's war against the Ottoman Empire. So Russia's fighting against the Ottoman Empire, and he goes and he is assigned to the Black Sea, uh, and he fights the Ottomans. Um,
hmm
but
has
it
a
actually
good amount
says
of success.
yes, it says he performed competently and was involved in successful operations against the Ottomans, but he never achieved a victory comparable to Flamborough Head. Um, but that could be a lot. Like that may not necessarily. Like I don't know. I just feel like Russia at that time, like the leadership and the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that isn't. I don't know. I just don't know if we should be like, whoa, he never did anything greater than just capturing one British warship, which is a big deal. But it's like, oh, he never did anything better. Well, I don't know. I feel like maybe he was like hamstrung a little bit in Russia.
Well, and I also want to point out that this is the 1700s, and the Queen of Russia has heard about this guy in the American Revolution.
Yeah.
Like she heard of him and his exploits and how good he was, and she personally reaches out to him and offers him the position of admiral immediately.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
he's got a reputation. If a country, the largest country on earth, halfway across the world, wants your services,
Oh,
in
absolutely.
the
Yeah.
1700s. Like
Yes.
it's a huge deal. It's not like they have the internet or
Right.
even a phone book.
Yeah. I mean, it's word of mouth. They don't even have the telegraph, dude. They're still like riding horses and talking about stuff and writing it, I guess, in the newspaper.
Yeah,
No, I agree. I think that does add to why he, is a forgotten hero. You know, he heroes don't heroes don't have to do these grand things. You think of like Chamberlain, right? Of the with the Maine in Gettysburg. He didn't do this grand operation, wasn't in charge of this giant military maneuver. It was a simple, I think we got to do a bayonet charge here, dude, and did it. And that's what made him a hero. And so John Paul Jones, yeah, like, I mean, does the United States win the Revolutionary War without John Paul Jones? Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe, but maybe not. We'll never really know. But again, it's just that fighting spirit of the American military, I think, that just he sets that standard so early on. And it's a standard that, again, I'm a veteran. I was in the Army, that that we want to uphold even today. I mean, you think of the Iran war, if you can call it a war. I mean, we have such a capable Navy. It's unbelievable how powerful a Navy is. And John Paul Jones was like the first one, the first guy to do it.
I
So,
do want to. Unfortunately, the end of his life was rather sad,
okay,
especially for somebody who accomplished as much as he did.
dude,
Um,
that's history, man. I mean, that's so many of these figures have
yeah,
tragic endings.
I read that a lot of his time in the Russian Navy was actually marred with controversy,
Something
and
with the girl wasn't there.
yeah, he was accused of forcing relations, we'll call it, with
Man,
a 12-year-old girl. Um, I did find that it was completely unsubstantiated, and it was just a hearsay, and it was because the other admirals in the Russian Navy did not like him at all.
right, right,
Um, but still, once you have that rumor mill working, it's it's so hard to disprove it,
right, right.
especially back then. And so it took a serious hit
Yeah.
on his health. And I read that he had been recontacted by the Continental Congress, and he was
Okay.
actually on his way back to America to serve as a consul for the United States Navy. But he actually died in Paris on the way back of kidney
Oh,
failure, and he was only 45. Um,
wow.
and I don't know how it got missed, but he was buried in an unmarked grave.
Yeah, I did. I read that too, and it was only like not, it wasn't super long ago. We actually got his remains back.
The early 1900s.
Yeah.
So he was over in Paris in an unmarked grave for over 100 years.
Wow.
Then it was Teddy Roosevelt
It was.
during
Yeah.
his presidency that
Hmm.
they rediscovered his remains in his grave. And he actually sent a fleet over to collect his remains and bring it back to Annapolis,
Oh,
where built a shrine into for his tomb, and that's where he is today. And Teddy Roosevelt gave him like a proper burial, a proper escort into the um, back to America, and then crowned him as the father of the United States Navy.
right, right. That's cool, man. Fascinating dude. Fascinating
Yeah.
time period. Uh, well, I think we hit it. Anything else you wanna talk about in our time here together?
I just have those quotes if we have time.
Let's do it,
I
dude.
mean, I know we've kind of really driven it home, but I don't think a guy like this can be bragged on enough,
Right.
and just the mindset that he has. So I just have three quick quotes. Excuse me. Um, One of them, he says, an honorable peace is and always was my first wish. I can take no delight in the effusion of human blood. But if this war should continue, I wish to have the most active part in it. Another one, he says, it seems to be a law of nature, inflexible and inexorable, that those who will not risk cannot win. And
Man, ain't
then,
that the truth?
yeah, and then this last one is phenomenal. If fear is cultivated, it will become stronger. If faith is cultivated, it will achieve mastery.
Wow. That does kind of make me wonder, did you find, was he like a faithful guy? Was he known at all for his faith? Like, was he a Christian, you know?
Nah, I didn't find anything explicitly. I mean, I think at this point everyone was raised in the church, but I
Right,
mean, he did
right,
run a guy through a sword with a sword for disagreeing with him.
right.
So there's that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true. So, well, dude, I think those quotes are a great way to end this podcast episode. So, for those that listened, thank you. We ask that you just like, maybe leave a comment, subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Tell your friends, you know, if you think what we're doing is worthy. Uh, but until next time, I'm Gabriel,
Carl.
and this is History Unscripted. Goodbye.